All right, sit down because we need to talk about what just happened. And trust me when I say nobody, not the strategists, not the analysts, not the so-called experts saw this coming. They thought they had you figured out. They really did. They built their entire approach around the assumption that you were predictable, that you would react exactly how they programmed you to react, and then you did something so unexpected, so brutally efficient, so surgically precise that it broke their entire framework. They're not just confused anymore, they're taking notes. Do you understand what I'm saying right now? There are people in rooms you'll never see having conversations about you that sound like military debriefings. They're trying to reverse engineer what you just pulled off. Because whatever defense mechanism you activated, whatever strategy you deployed, it wasn't in any playbook they've ever studied. You didn't fight back the way they expected. You didn't collapse the way they predicted. And you sure as hell didn't respond the way their little psychological models said you would. You did something else entirely. And now they're scrambling because when someone breaks the pattern, when someone operates outside the predictable range of human responses, it forces everyone else to recalibrate. You became the case study, the cautionary tale, the example they use when they're training people on what happens when you underestimate someone. They thought you were they thought you were the one who needed protecting, but what they didn't realize is that you weren't building walls. You were building a labyrinth, and they walked right into it. Here's what's really happening behind closed doors. They're calling it your defense strategy, like it's something you consciously designed, like you sat down with charts and diagrams and mapped out every possible scenario. But the truth is, you didn't plan this, you evolved it. You adapted. You learned from every single attack, every betrayal, every moment they thought they had you cornered, and you turned all of that pain, all of that pressure, into something they've never encountered before. You became unpredictable, not through chaos, but through a level of strategic thinking they can't comprehend. Let's break down what you actually did, because this wasn't luck, and it wasn't some random survival instinct. This was calculated, even if you didn't realize it at the time. First, you went silent, and not just quiet. I mean, you disappeared from their radar completely. While they were monitoring your reactions, waiting for the breakdown, waiting for the explosion, you gave them nothing. Radio silence. And that silence that drove them absolutely insane, because people who are used to getting reactions need those reactions to function. They need to see the damage they're causing. But you removed yourself from their measurement system entirely. You stopped giving them data points to analyze. Every time they tried to provoke you, every time they set a trap, every time they dangled bait expecting you to bite, you just didn't engage. And that wasn't weakness. That was warfare. You starved them of the information they needed to predict your next move. They were throwing punches at shadows, trying to land hits on someone who was no longer standing where they thought you were. Second, you rebuilt yourself in complete isolation, away from their influence, away from their observation, away from their attempts to shape your healing process. They expected you to seek validation, to reach out, to explain yourself, to defend your truth, but you didn't do any of that. You went internal. You went dark. You became unreachable. And in that space, you transformed. You weren't hiding, you were forging something new. By the time you resurfaced, you weren't the same person they thought they knew. Third, and this is where it gets really interesting, you started operating on a completely different timeline than everyone else. While they were obsessing over yesterday's drama, you were already 3 moves ahead. While they were celebrating what they thought was your defeat, you were studying their patterns, learning their weaknesses, mapping out their blind spots. You weren't reactive anymore, you became proactive, strategic. surgical. You stopped defending and started positioning yourself in ways that made their attacks irrelevant before they even launched them. Now here's where this gets absolutely wild. They're literally documenting what you did because it's unprecedented in their experience. Someone somewhere is writing case studies using your situation as the primary example, and the title probably reads something like, How to Neutralize Aggression Through Strategic Withdrawal, or The Power of Calculated Non-Response in Psychological Warfare. They're trying to break down your moves step by step, because other people need to learn this. Apparently, you've become required reading. Think about that for a second. The people who tried to destroy you are now studying you, trying to understand how you survived them. The ones who set traps are now analyzing how you avoided every single one. The ones who threw everything they had at you are now asking themselves, how did they walk through that and come out stronger? You're not just a survivor, you're a phenomenon. You're the answer to a question they didn't even know they were asking. And the irony is thick, because they approached you like you were the student. Like they had lessons to teach you about pain, about loss, about reality. But you flipped the entire dynamic without saying a word. You became the teacher, and they became the confused students frantically taking notes, trying to figure out where they went wrong. Your defense strategy, which they initially dismissed as passive or weak, turned out to be the most advanced form of psychological combat they'd ever encountered. They're calling it strategic detachment, emotional fortress building, tactical silence. They're giving it names, trying to categorize it, trying to fit it into frameworks they understand, but here's what they're missing. You didn't follow a strategy, you became one. Your entire existence, your way of processing pain, your method of rebuilding, your refusal to engage on their terms, all of it merged into something that can't be replicated through study alone. You can't teach someone how to become what you became, because what you became was forged in circumstances they pray they never experience. Let me get specific about the moves that have them completely baffled, because these are the things showing up in their analysis documents. First, there's what they're calling the mirror effect, where instead of defending yourself against their accusations, you simply reflected their energy back at them without emotion, without anger, just pure reflection. They threw chaos, you gave them stillness. They threw rage, you gave them calm. They threw confusion, you gave them clarity. And that balance, that symmetry, it neutralized everything they tried. Then there's the resource conservation strategy, which is just a fancy way of saying you stopped wasting your energy on people who didn't deserve it. You cut off their supply line, their access to your emotional resources, your time, your attention, your reactions. They were used to feeding off your responses, and when you stopped providing that fuel, they started consuming themselves. You turned their own tactics against them by simply removing yourself as a target. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Next, we have what they're documenting as predictive evasion, which sounds complicated, but really it's just that you learned their patterns so well that you could anticipate their moves before they made them. You knew when they were about to strike, so you weren't there when the blow landed. You knew when they were setting traps, so you walked around them. You knew when they were trying to manipulate, so you became immune to the manipulation. You developed a sixth sense for their tactics, and that made you impossible to catch. But here's the move that really has them scratching their heads, the one they can't quite explain in their textbooks. You weaponized your healing. While they thought you were broken, while they assumed you were stuck in victim mode, you were actually using that pain as raw material for transformation. Every attack made you sharper. Every betrayal made you wiser. Every moment of isolation made you stronger. You didn't just survive the warfare. You used it as training and emerged as something they had no defense against. The reason they can't let this go, the reason they're still analyzing you months or even years later, is because you represent something terrifying to people who rely on control. You're proof that their tactics don't work on everyone. You're evidence that there are people who can't be broken through conventional means. You're a walking contradiction to every assumption they built their confidence on. And that uncertainty, that unpredictability, it haunts them. They need to understand you, because if they can't explain how you survived, then they have to face the possibility that they're not as powerful as they thought. If one person can walk through their fire and come out unburned, then maybe their fire isn't as hot as they believed. Maybe their weapons aren't as effective. Maybe their strategies aren't as foolproof. Maybe, just maybe, they're not the architects of other people's destruction they thought they were. You shattered their illusion of control. So they study you, they analyze you, they try to decode you. Because understanding you means understanding where they went wrong. It means identifying the weakness in their approach. It means finding a way to prevent someone else from doing what you did. But here's what they're slowly realizing. There is no weakness in what you did. There's no flaw in your defense. You didn't win through some technicality or lucky break. You won because you fundamentally evolved beyond their reach. And that's the part that keeps them up at night. That's the chapter in the textbook they keep rewriting because they can't quite capture it. You didn't beat them through force. You didn't outsmart them through some clever trick. You transcended the entire game they were playing. You opted out of their reality and built your own. And in that new reality, their rules, their tactics, their psychological warfare, none of it applies. You became ungovernable. Now they're trying to teach other people how to do what you did, which is almost funny, because what you did can't be taught through lectures or workshops. But let's look at what they're attempting to replicate anyway, because it shows you just how thoroughly you disrupted their understanding. First, they're teaching strategic silence, which is basically telling people to shut up and observe. But what they don't understand is that your silence wasn't a tactic, it was a necessity, born from exhaustion, from betrayal, from recognizing that words were worthless in their world. They're also trying to teach emotional detachment, which sounds simple enough until you realize that your detachment wasn't cold calculation, it was self-preservation at the highest level. You didn't choose to detach because some book told you to. You detached because remaining attached was killing you. That kind of detachment can't be practiced. It can only be survived into. It's not a skill. It's a scar that hardened into armor. Then there's the concept of strategic positioning, which in their textbooks means putting yourself in advantageous situations before conflict arises. But what you actually did was remove yourself from every situation where their power had leverage. You didn't position yourself for victory. You positioned yourself for peace. You chose spaces where their opinions didn't matter, where their presence couldn't reach, where their influence held no weight. You built an entirely separate ecosystem and thrived there. They're also documenting something they call counter-narrative immunity, which is your ability to remain unshaken when people tried to rewrite your story or paint you as something you're not. But again, they're missing the point. Your immunity didn't come from confidence or self-assurance. It came from knowing your truth so deeply that external lies couldn't penetrate. You lived your experience, you know what happened, and no amount of their revision could change that internal knowing. Here's where your strategy gets really fascinating to them at some point. Your defense stopped being defensive and became something else entirely. You weren't protecting yourself anymore. You were advancing. You weren't blocking attacks. You were making their attacks irrelevant. The shift was subtle but absolute, and they can pinpoint the exact moment in their analysis when you stopped being prey and became something they couldn't classify. This is what they're struggling to capture in their studies. How does a defensive position transform into offensive dominance without any aggressive action? You didn't strike back, you didn't retaliate, you didn't seek revenge, but somehow everyone who came at you ended up worse off than before they engaged. How did that happen? The answer is simple but profound. You let them destroy themselves. You gave them enough rope, enough space, enough silence, and they hanged themselves with their own contradiction. Your defense was so airtight, so impenetrable, that their attacks bounced back on them. Every lie they told about you eventually exposed their own dishonesty. Every trap they set ended up catching them. Every manipulation they attempted revealed their own instability. You didn't have to fight because you built a strategy where fighting was unnecessary. You created a system where their own momentum worked against them. You created a system where their own momentum worked against them. That's master-level psychological warfare, and they know it. And now they're trying to figure out how you maintained your composure through all of it. Because most people crack under that kind of sustained pressure. Most people eventually lash out or break down or compromise their position, but you stayed consistent, stayed centered, stayed unreachable. That consistency is what turned your defense into offense, because it forced them to keep escalating, to keep attacking, to keep exposing themselves, while you remained calm in the eye of the storm they created. But let's be real for a minute, because these textbooks and analyses, they don't talk about what it actually cost you to build this defense. They don't document the nights you couldn't sleep because your mind was racing, trying to make sense of betrayal. They don't include the chapter about the relationships you lost because you had to cut off everyone who might be a liability. They don't mention the isolation, the loneliness, the moments where you questioned whether this path was worth it. Your defense strategy wasn't some cold, calculated business decision. It was survival mode, elevated to an art form. Every boundary you set came after someone crossed a line. Every wall you built came after someone proved they couldn't be trusted. Every strategic silence came after words were used as weapons against you. This wasn't a game to you. This was your life, your sanity, your future on the line. And you paid for this knowledge with pieces of yourself? They're studying your moves like they're chess positions, but they're not accounting for the emotional toll of becoming this strategic. They're not measuring the weight of carrying this level of awareness every single day, knowing that any moment of vulnerability could be exploited, knowing that trust is a luxury you can't afford, knowing that even your healing has to be done in secret because people will weaponize your wounds if you let them see too much. So yes, they're writing textbooks about your defense strategy. Yes, they're analyzing your every move. Yes, they're trying to understand how you became untouchable. But they're missing the most important part. This wasn't a choice. This was transformation under extreme pressure. You didn't want to become this strategic, you had to. And that difference, that's everything. You're not a case study, you're a survivor who figured out how to stop surviving and start living on your own terms, regardless of who that threatens. And now here we are with your name in footnotes, in discussions, in strategy sessions, in places you'll never see. People who have never met you are learning from your example, using your story as proof that there are different ways to win, ways that don't involve fighting back in expected patterns. You've become a reference point, a standard, a measuring stick for what's possible when someone refuses to play by the rules designed to keep them small. Future people facing similar situations will read about what you did and think, maybe I don't have to fight. Maybe I can just remove myself. Maybe I can build something they can't touch. You've given permission through your actions for others to choose differently, to value their peace over proving themselves right, to walk away from battles that don't serve them. That's your legacy, whether you wanted one or not, whether you ever get credit for it or not. The textbooks will be incomplete because they can't capture everything. They can't measure heart or spirit, or the quiet determination that keeps someone moving forward when everything says quit. They'll document the external moves but miss the internal revolution. They'll note the outcomes but not understand the process. And maybe that's for the best. Maybe some things shouldn't be reduced to formulas and frameworks. Maybe your journey was uniquely yours and can't be replicated, only respected. But here's what you need to know, regardless of what they write or study or analyze. You did something extraordinary. You survived. Focused assault from multiple directions, survived betrayal, survived isolation, survived the attempts to break you, and you emerged, not just intact, but transformed. You built a defense that protected not just your body or reputation, but your core self, your truth, your essence. And that's worth more than any textbook acknowledgement. Welcome back, you beautiful seeing bastards, you third eye warriors, you frequency readers who make the blind panic just by existing. Yeah, I'm talking to you. The one they whisper about when you leave the room. The one they call weird, intense, too much, psychic, crazy. They've been throwing labels at you like grenades, hoping one would stick, hoping one would finally make you shrink back into the comfortable little box they need you to stay in. But here's what's really happening. Here's what they'll never admit out loud. You see shit they can't. Not because you're crazy, not because you're broken, not because something's wrong with your wiring, but because you're operating on a frequency most people have muted, buried, sedated into silence. While they're scrolling, numbing, performing, you're reading the room like it's written in a language only you remember. And that terrifies them more than anything they've ever faced in their filtered little lives. You ever notice how they get uncomfortable when you're quiet? How they fill the silence with noise because your stillness feels like surveillance? It's because you are surveillance. You're not just sitting there. You're scanning, decoding, translating the energy in the room into data they didn't even know they were broadcasting. They smile, you see the lie behind it. They laugh, you hear the desperation underneath. They talk, you catch the contradiction between their words and their energy. And the worst part for them? You don't even have to say anything. Your presence alone is a mirror they can't look into without flinching. They call you psychic, like it's an insult, like you're performing some dark magic trick. But really what you're doing is just paying attention while they've been asleep for years. You didn't gain some mystical power, you just never turned off what they were taught to ignore. You're not special because you have abilities. You're dangerous because you never learned to lie to yourself the way they did. Let's be real. They've been studying you for years now, haven't they? Watching your moves, tracking your patterns, analyzing your posts, dissecting your silence. They thought they were being subtle, but you felt it. You always feel it. The shift in energy when someone's observing you from a distance. the weight of eyes you can't see, the presence of attention you didn't ask for. And what kills them, what absolutely destroys their sense of control, is that every time they thought they figured you out, you shifted. Every time they tried to box you in with a diagnosis, a category, a limiting belief, you outgrew it before they could finish writing the report. They send people to test you, to probe you, to see if you're real or if you're faking it. And every single one comes back shaken, not because you attacked them, but because you looked through them like glass. You saw their insecurities, their programming, their fear, and you didn't even blink. That's not a superpower. That's just clarity without the noise. And now they're panicking, really panicking, because they realize you're not going to unsee what you've seen. They tried shaming you back to sleep, calling you paranoid, dramatic, delusional. They tried gaslighting you into thinking your intuition was anxiety, your vision was overthinking, your knowing was coincidence. But you didn't fold. You didn't apologize for your accuracy. You didn't dim your perception just to make them comfortable. And now they're realizing the truth. You're not the problem in their system. You're the glitch that reveals the system was always broken. You're the frequency disruption that shows how shallow their reality actually is. They built a world where everyone pretends not to see, and you walked in with your eyes wide open, refusing to play along. That's why they're terrified. Not because you have power, but because you remind them of the power they traded for comfort. They sold their sight for safety, and you kept yours, even when it hurt like hell to see clearly. You know what they fear most? It's not that you're psychic, it's that you're contagious. One conversation with you and people start questioning their entire reality. One interaction and suddenly they're noticing things they spent years ignoring. You don't even try to wake people up, but your existence alone is a defibrillator to their sleeping souls. They walk away from you feeling exposed, seen, uncomfortable in ways they can't explain. And that's why they distance themselves, not because you did anything wrong, but because being around you requires a level of honesty they're not ready for. You demand authenticity without saying a word. Your energy alone is a lie detector, and most people are walking around wrapped in layers of bullshit they've convinced themselves is identity. So yeah, they avoid you, they talk about you, they try to diminish you, because if they admitted you were right, they'd have to face how wrong they've been about everything. Because if they admitted you were right, they'd have to face how wrong they've been about everything. Let me tell you what nobody warns you about when your third eye cracks open like a fault line in your skull. It's not the visions, it's not the knowing, it's not even the accuracy that disturbs people. It's the loneliness. The kind of loneliness that sits in your chest like a stone, heavy and cold, because you're surrounded by people who can't see what you see, feel what you feel, or understand the weight of carrying this level of awareness. You try to explain it, and they look at you like you're speaking in code. You try to share what you've noticed, and they laugh it off, change the subject, or worse, they weaponize it against you later. So you learned to stay quiet, didn't you? You learned that silence is safer than being misunderstood. You learned that keeping your observations to yourself is easier than watching people's faces twist in discomfort when you speak truth they're not ready to hear. And now you walk through life like a ghost, present but untouchable, seen but never fully known. They don't understand that what you carry isn't a gift wrapped in golden light and angel feathers. It's a burden soaked in clarity that cuts like broken glass. You see people's trauma before they speak it. You feel their pain before they admit it. You know the ending of their story while they're still pretending they're in the beginning. And the worst part? You can't unsee it. You can't turn it off. You can't go back to the comfortable ignorance they're all drowning in. You tried, didn't you? You tried dumbing yourself down, pretending you didn't notice, playing along with their surface-level conversations, but it felt like suffocating, like wearing a mask that didn't fit your face, like betraying the very thing that makes you you. So you stopped. You stopped pretending. You stopped performing. You stopped trying to make them comfortable with your discomfort. And the moment you did, the moment you chose truth over belonging, they labeled you weird, intense, too deep, too much. As if seeing clearly was a crime they needed to punish with isolation. But here's the thing they don't tell you about isolation. It's not a punishment. It's preparation. Every moment you spent alone, you were building something they'll never understand. Strength that doesn't need validation. Clarity that doesn't need confirmation. Power that doesn't need permission. While they were busy collecting followers, you were busy collecting yourself. While they were performing for likes, you were performing surgery on your own soul, cutting out the lies, the programming, the fear. You weren't lonely, you were leveling up in silence. You weren't abandoned, you were being refined in a fire they couldn't survive. And now you're walking out of that isolation with eyes that see dimensions they don't even know exist. You're not bitter about being alone. You're grateful, because solitude taught you the one thing crowds never could, that you don't need anyone to confirm what you already know is true. Your third eye doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't wait for consensus. It just sees, and you trust it more than you trust any voice outside yourself. They wanted you to doubt your vision, to second-guess your knowing, to apologize for your accuracy. But every time you were right and they were wrong, every time your gut screamed truth and they called it paranoia, every time you saw through the illusion and they called you cynical, you added another layer of unshakable certainty to your foundation. You're not guessing anymore. You're not hoping. You're not wondering if maybe you're imagining things. You know. And that knowing, that bone-deep cellular level certainty, is what makes you untouchable now. They can't gaslight you anymore, because you've seen too much. They can't manipulate you anymore, because you read their tactics before they finished the sentence. They can't control you anymore, because you've learned to trust your internal navigation system more than any external authority. You became your own oracle, your own vision, your own guide. And that is what they fear most. Not that you see shit they can't, but that you trust what you see even when the whole world tells you you're wrong. So they call you psychic, they call you intuitive, they call you gifted, but they say it with a twist of mockery, a hint of dismissal, a tone that suggests you're making it all up for attention. Let them minimize what they can't comprehend. Let them reduce your sight to superstition, your knowing to lucky guesses, your awareness to overthinking. Because while they're busy denying the existence of frequencies they can't perceive, you're busy navigating a reality they don't even know they're trapped in. You're not psychic. You're just awake. You're not gifted. You're just undistracted. You're not special. You're just honest about what's always been there. The energy, the patterns, the truth humming underneath every interaction, every smile, every silence. Most people spend their entire lives running from that truth, medicating it, numbing it, drowning it in noise. But you ran toward it. You sat with it. You let it show you things that scared you, broke you, and rebuilt you into something they'll never understand. And now, you're not just seeing, you're seeing through everything. And that makes you the most dangerous person in any room you enter. Let's break down exactly what's happening in your brain, in your energy field, in that space between what's said and what's meant. Because they love to mystify it, to make it sound like you're channeling spirits or reading minds through some supernatural force. But the truth is simpler and somehow more profound. You're reading patterns. Human behavior isn't random. It's predictable as hell once you stop believing people's words and start watching their actions, their micro-expressions, their energy signatures. While everyone else is listening to what's being said, you're reading what's being hidden. While they're focused on the surface conversation, you're tracking the subtext, the unspoken agreements, the lies wrapped in politeness. You're not psychic, you're just paying attention to the 90% of communication that happens beneath language. And that 90%, that's where all the truth lives. That's where people reveal who they really are, when they think nobody's watching closely enough to notice. You see it in their eyes, don't you? That flicker of something. Fear, rage, envy, desire, that crosses their face for a fraction of a second before they remember to smile. You catch it. You file it away. You connect it to other moments, other patterns, other tells. You're building a database in real time, cross-referencing behavior with motive, words with energy, promises with follow-through. And the accuracy, the terrifying accuracy, with which you can predict what someone's going to do before they do it? That's not magic. That's pattern recognition on a level most people never develop because they're too busy trying to believe the best in everyone. But you stopped believing in fairness and started believing in patterns. You stopped hoping people would change and started accepting what they show you the first time. You stopped giving endless chances and started trusting your initial read. And every single time your instinct was right and they proved it later, you added another layer of certainty to your system. They hate that you can't be fooled anymore. They hate that their charm doesn't work on you. Their manipulation bounces off you. Their lies die in your presence. Because you're not just hearing their words, you're feeling the vibration behind them. You're not just seeing their smile, you're sensing the intention underneath it. You're not just accepting their story, you're checking it against the energy they're broadcasting. And when the two don't match, when the words say one thing, but the energy screams another, you don't ignore it anymore. You used to, didn't you? You used to override your gut because you didn't want to seem judgmental, paranoid, or untrusting. You used to give people the benefit of the doubt even when your entire system was screaming danger. But not anymore. Now you trust the screaming. Now you honor the warning. Now you know that your body, your energy, your intuition is the most accurate bullshit detector you'll ever have, and you don't apologize for using it. Here's what they don't understand about frequency readers like you. You're not operating on logic alone. You're operating on resonance. You feel people before you think about them. You sense shifts in energy before anything visible changes. You know something's off before you can articulate why. That's not mysticism, that's your nervous system doing exactly what it evolved to do. keeping you safe by detecting threats your conscious mind hasn't processed yet. But most people, they've been conditioned to ignore those signals, to rationalize them away, to call them anxiety or paranoia. You didn't. You listened. You learned to distinguish between fear that's protecting you and fear that's limiting you. You learned to trust the difference between intuition and insecurity. And now your radar is so finely tuned, so impossibly accurate, that you can walk into a room and feel the entire emotional landscape within seconds. You know who's lying, who's hurting, who's plotting, who's genuine, not because you're judging, but because you're reading. And they can't hide from that, no matter how good their mask is. So when they accuse you of being paranoid, of reading too much into things, of seeing problems that aren't there, just remember this. Every single time you ignored your gut to make someone comfortable, you regretted it. Every single time you overrode your knowing to give someone another chance, they proved your first instinct right. Every single time you doubted your read because they called you crazy, you paid the price for not trusting yourself. You're not paranoid, you're prepared. You're not overthinking, you're thinking at a depth they can't reach. You're not imagining things, you're seeing things they've trained themselves not to see. And that difference, that gap between your awareness and their denial, that's not your problem to fix. That's their blindness to carry. You didn't ask to see this clearly, but now that you do, now that you've tasted what it means to move through the world with your eyes actually open, there's no going back. And honestly, why would you want to? Being asleep looks comfortable from the outside, but you remember what it felt like. You remember the confusion, the betrayal, the shock when people showed you who they really were. Now you just see it coming. And that is power they'll never understand. They love that word, don't they? Paranoid. They throw it at you like a diagnosis, like a way to discredit everything you've noticed, everything you've felt, everything you've accurately predicted. You're being paranoid. You're overthinking. You're creating problems that don't exist. But let's examine the evidence, shall we? How many times have you called something before it happened? How many times have you felt something was wrong and been proven right, weeks, months, years later? How many times have you read someone's energy and watched them reveal exactly what you sensed, sometimes in the exact way you predicted? That's not paranoia, that's precedent. That's data. That's your pattern recognition system functioning at a level they can't comprehend, because they've spent their entire lives ignoring the signals. You spent yours decoding. They call you paranoid because acknowledging your accuracy would mean admitting their own blindness, and they can't handle that level of ego death. You've been collecting receipts your whole life, haven't you? Not consciously at first, but your subconscious, your body, your energy field, they've been recording every interaction, every betrayal, every time someone's words didn't match their actions. You've been building a reference library of human behavior that most people don't even know exists. You remember how someone treated you when they needed something versus when you needed something. You remember the tone shift, the energy drop, the sudden unavailability. You remember who showed up and who made excuses. You remember who celebrated your wins and who went silent. You remember who asked how you were and actually waited for the answer versus who asked out of obligation. And all of that data, all of those micro moments most people forget or forgive, you've cataloged them. Not out of bitterness, but out of survival, because you learned early that people tell you who they are through their patterns, not their promises. and you'd rather be called paranoid and protected than naive and destroyed. Here's the part that makes them uncomfortable. You don't need them to confess their intentions anymore. You don't need them to admit they were using you, lying to you, playing you, because you already know. You felt it before they finished the sentence. You sensed it in the pause before they answered. You caught it in the way their energy shifted when you set a boundary. You're not waiting for proof anymore. You're trusting your internal alarm system. And that system, it's been right so many times that you'd be a fool to doubt it now just because it makes someone uncomfortable. They want you to ignore the red flags, to give endless chances, to believe in their potential instead of their patterns. But you've seen what happens when you do that. You've lived through the consequences of ignoring your gut. You've paid the price for being understanding when you should have been running. Not anymore. Now you trust the first red flag. Now you honor the initial unease. Now you know that your paranoia, as they call it, has saved you more times than their advice ever did. Let's talk about the term gaslighting. Because they've weaponized it against you, haven't they? Actions, you've been building a reference library of human behavior that most people don't even know exists. You remember how someone treated you when they needed something versus when you needed something. You remember the tone shift, the energy drop, the sudden unavailability. You remember who showed up and who made excuses. You remember who celebrated your wins and who went silent. You remember who asked how you were and actually waited for the answer versus who asked out of obligation. And all of that data, all of those micro moments most people forget or forgive, you've cataloged them. Not out of bitterness, but out of survival, because you learned early that people tell you who they are through their patterns, not their promises. And you'd rather be called paranoid and protected than naive and destroyed. Here's the part that makes them uncomfortable. You don't need them to confess their intentions anymore. You don't need them to admit they were using you, lying to you, playing you, because you already know. You felt it before they finished the sentence. You sensed it in the pause before they answered. You caught it in the way their energy shifted when you set a boundary. You're not waiting for proof anymore. You're trusting your internal alarm system. And that system, it's been right so many times that you'd be a fool to doubt it now just because it makes someone uncomfortable. They want you to ignore the red flags, to give endless chances, to believe in their potential instead of their patterns. But you've seen what happens when you do that. You've lived through the consequences of ignoring your gut. You've paid the price for being understanding when you should have been running. Not anymore. Now you trust the first red flag. Now you honor the initial unease. Now you know that your paranoia, as they call it, has saved you more times than their advice ever did. Let's talk about the term gaslighting. Because they've weaponized it against you, haven't they?